Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another session where we are responding to some of the major shubuhat relating to the religion of Islam, some of the major doubts, questions, misconceptions that people have. And today we're going to be talking about the Riddah laws. And really today's discussion is going to be based around my own research, which was the subject of one of my dissertations actually, for one of my master's degrees in 2019. And I'm going to actually read, and which I've actually made into a small book, which you can get online on Amazon, the treatise a treatise on liberal critiques of Riddah. So I'm going to read out what the basic, to jump straight into it, the basic argument that I make is some of the novel, contributions I hope to have been able to make are, and then we'll have a discussion thereafter. So I've written the very introduction of the of that particular book that I'm going to read out what I said. So I am writing this treatise not to defend Islamic penal laws, but merely to show that our current critique of Islam is a poor one. So below is a summary of my argument. Point number 1. Liberals seek to critique Islam's penal laws, especially the law of Riddah, because of its non-conformity with modern human rights legislation. Now we've already covered modern human rights legislation. The obvious thing that people say about that is that, well, if you punish someone for changing their religion, this is something which goes against human rights. And this is number 2, Islam's punishment for Riddah can be implemented or waived depending on the context. And obviously I give the examples of that in this small booklet, but also that this is something within the Islamic penal code. But of course the Sheikh is here, can correct us if anything that I've said is incorrect. I'm actually happy that the Sheikh is here because now the things can be checked on two different levels. Number 3, liberal principles, assuming a contractarian form of liberalism, theoretically allow for punishments which can be implemented or waived, identical to those punishing Riddah. So this is all, I've sent this to you guys in the group by the way, so I can send you these. You don't need to write every single point, but I'm just letting you know the line of argumentation. So let me just revise what we've just said already before we continue. Number 1, we say that liberals seek to critique Islam's penal codes, especially the law of Riddah, because of its non-conformity with modern human rights. Number 2, Islam's punishment for Riddah can be implemented and it can be waived, depending on the context. Number 3, liberal principles, which we've already discussed in this class before in the London Air series, talking about contractarianism, assuming a contractarian form of liberalism, theoretically allow for punishments which can be implemented or waived, identical to those of like Riddah. In other words, the argument is that Riddah laws or the punishments of Riddah can be implemented in a liberal state, in a contractarian form of liberalism, which by the way is the only kind of liberalism which has been implemented contemporaneously or historically. There's no other kind of liberalism which has ever been manifested in the political sphere, only a contractarian form. And just to remind myself and others, who knows, or what do we mean by a contractarian form of liberalism? In particular, so what are the main salient features of a contractarian form before we continue?
Is it Thomas Hobbes where he introduced that basically if we didn't have contracts, there will be disorder, there will be anarchy.
Okay.
People will have the freedom to do whatever they like, however that will come at the cost of basically being robbed, killed. So if we have some kind of a form of contract, you're going into some kind of agreement, so you're letting go of some of your rights for a greater purpose, or like the government giving you the I can't remember it, but what I know is basically you let go of some of your rights for bigger objectives.
Does anyone want to add to that? You're definitely on the right tracks. I mean, there's not anything necessarily wrong in what you said at all. Is there anything else that one wants to add on this point of contractarianism?
The idea a subject in a state have indirectly accepted that a certain group of people will have authority over them. So they've given up freedom for in return for safety or security.
Perfect. That's well phrased. This is exactly what we're looking for. What you were saying, Ali, was actually correct as well, because the idea really is, what Thomas Hobbes in the Leviathan, he mentions, he wrote a book called the Leviathan, right? And he mentions something called the state of nature. We discussed this. And it was a hypothetical state. It wasn't an actual state. So it wasn't a state which actually took place in the real world. A hypothetical state means a state which is fictitious. It's an idea in someone's mind. It's not based on real events. Okay? So what Thomas Hobbes was saying is that basically if we take the idea that human beings will be left free to do whatever they want to do, he had an all against all mentality. He thought everyone would fight each other. That's what would happen. By the way, this is depicted in a book called Lord of the Flies. I'm not sure if anyone has read that book, but it was based on this idea. We do it in school. That's why a lot of you may have read. We do it in English literature, right? Anyway, the idea is that it's all against all. But that's his idea of contractarianism. His idea of the state of nature. That particular idea is not necessarily shared by all. Like John Locke didn't have the idea that if people were left in the state of nature that they would all fight each other. So there was competing liberal ideas of what the state of nature is. There wasn't one idea of what the state of nature is. John Locke had a different idea to Thomas Hobbes and so on. But the point that Mu'adh mentioned is the correct one. Eventually, whatever the state of nature is, whether it's all against all, whether people are collaborating with one another or whatever it may be, there is a barter, if you like. There is a barter of freedom in exchange for security, and this is the main point. Now, in the modern day, how is this manifested? Because we said that almost every liberal country is contractarian. So how am I and you part of the social contract now?
Government.
Yeah, but how? Citizenship. Okay, beautiful, right. So if you have a citizenship in this country, that means what?
You have entitlement. Well, you're entitled to some things at the cost of, obeying the law.
Yeah, absolutely, perfect, right? And what are the ways of acquiring citizenship? I mean, how did you acquire it?
I came to the country when I was 1 year old.
No, tell them the truth. How much did you pay for it?
That's a different story.
What we're talking about is, someone who was born here.
Yeah.
Okay, I was born here. Right?
So that's different to someone born to someone coming here, because then you need to give you kind of allegiance in that sense. Because if you're born, it's like if I'm not mistaken, you said if we're born here, we're from the get-go, and nobody asked us, do you obey? If you go past a speed camera, and you get fined, you can't say, I didn't agree to this. From the get-go, you have entitlements, and you have to obey to those laws. But if you are someone who seeks asylum here, then I think it's a bit of a different story.
It is a different story, but philosophically here, what's the main difference? It's a
word
word beginning with
born
C.
into it.
It's a word beginning with C.
C.
Coercion.
Well, the opposite of consent. Okay, beautiful. So in one case there is what, and in what other case there isn't?
So in one case, you are being coerced when you're born, and when you seek asylum, you are consenting.
Yeah, okay. It's not just seeking asylum. You can get visa through different.
No, I know
means.
that. I know that.
Not only the way that you've done it. But having said that, this is the idea, because I was forced into a social contract. This is very interesting and important. The difference between an Islamic social contract. Sometimes there are similarities. You can be forced into an Islamic social contract as well. Like if your both parents are Muslim. The fuqaha see that as you're Muslim as well. That's as simple as that, really. So you can be forced into a social contract. Otherwise, you'd have what? Disorder. But if you become a Muslim, it's kind of like acquiring citizenship. Now, the reason why this is important is because actually people look at these matters in a very secular manner. So they look at these matters but Islam is not a secular system. So it conflates religion and politics. It's both together. There's no separation between church and state. Which means that when you are a Muslim now, you have, and especially if you have given bay'ah, which is additional thing, if you've given a pledge of allegiance, then now you are not only a fully fledged citizen, but anything you do or say may be held against you in a court of law, quite literally. So this is what we mean by contractarianism, a very important thing. Okay, because contractarianism is the idea that you are in a contract now, a social contract. And the head of government is who in this country?
Queen.
No, it's the Prime Minister. Okay, it's the Prime Minister. The Queen has a ceremonial role. Ever since Charles II, the Parliament became sovereign. So the Queen is no longer, she has a ceremonial role, but she's no longer sovereign in that sense. Ever since in the 1500s and so on, there was a movement in this country. The Queen actually had power. The last time the Queen actually tried to veto a law, because she can technically veto a law, was Queen Victoria, I think it was, and she was overruled or something like that. So the Queen is the head of the Church of England and all the kind of this is all ceremonial stuff. It doesn't really have any legislative implications. In terms of this country, there's three types of law. In the UK, there's a constitutional law. There is, by the way, a British constitution. Just because it's not codified, it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. There is a British constitution, and there is statute law, and then there is in courts they use case law as well. There's common law, but the constitutional law is fragmented and it's uncodified in this country. So there is a constitution in this country. It's fragmented and it's uncodified. I mean, it's not written in one place. In America, it's codified and it's centralized. So it's all in one place and it's not fragmented. But you should be aware of these things because obviously we live in this country. We have to know how the system works. So Parliament is sovereign, meaning Parliament gets to make the rules and decisions. In this case, it's the House of Commons. Obviously, the House of Lords, it kind of it ratifies or whatever the laws, but it's not created. Law creation is happening in the House of Commons, where there's 650 odd, I think, seats. But really, those who make the laws are not the backbench MPs. They are the cabinet, if you like, the government. Although technically, it's possible for someone who is a backbench MP to write down something called white paper and get it done. But for the most part, law creation is done by the cabinet and the government, the executive. Anyway, so this is how it works. And in all liberal countries, therefore, there is a contract that you have, and you have to obey the law, and especially if you're a citizen. And obviously, with that, there comes privileges. And we should mention, actually, there's recently a bill that maybe we should put this. It's called the National. What's it called? The National Borders Bill. Is that what it's called?
Nationality
Nationality Bill, right?
and borders.
Nationality and Borders Bill. Yeah, this is a recent bill. Literally, we're talking. Priti Patel literally wants to put this on, the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago, which is trying to expand the scope of deprivation of citizenship for people that are basically like dual nationals or whatever. Which is that if someone does something which is in quote unquote against the public good, then they can have their citizenship deprived. And this law hasn't made it through yet, and it's been obviously challenged now, not just by Muslims, by the way, but it's been challenged by the LGBT groups, the black community. A lot of people are challenging this group because they're seeing it as racist, because it's going to disproportionately affect ethnic minorities. But these are the problems with citizenship. You can even be stripped of your citizenship on grounds as flimsy as the public good. It's very broad grounds. Obviously, deprivation of citizenship, which is what happens when people think, it's called deprivation, when they take your citizenship away from you. This is very, very, very rare. I mean, considering the history of Britain, considering the amount of people that lived in it, there have been few cases, I mean, considering the population of Britain, of actual deprivation, them taking away your citizenship. And they have to do something pretty heavy for that to be the case. However, as we'll come to, deprivation of citizenship, which is a very harsh measure, is not the only way for you to be punished in a social contract. In this country, they have treason laws for a very long time, laws of treachery and treason, and they still do, in a sense, but in a different guise, through discussion about terrorism which is inherently discriminatory, which is anti-liberal, by the way, which is something we can come to, because liberalism says everyone should be equal. But these laws that they're putting in place is inherently favoring some communities over others. So already the social contract is not in accordance with the principles laid down. So we have issues here now, because according to liberalism, everyone should be the same. But the laws that are being put in place now are discriminatory to one group over another. So you can even argue within liberal paradigm that the laws that are being put in place now are clearly, like the Patriot Act in America, and these kinds of terrorist acts to prevent all these kinds of things. Within the liberal paradigm, you can make strong arguments against this stuff. But anyway, this is just a kind of a tangent. Number 4, I just want to revise the 3 points I just made. Yeah, the first point we made is liberals seek to critique Islam's penal laws, especially the law of Riddah, because of its non-conformity with modern human rights legislation. Number 2, Islam's punishment for Riddah can be implemented or waived depending on the context. Number 3, liberal principles, assuming a contractarian form of liberalism, theoretically allow for punishments which can be implemented or waived, identical to those punishments of Riddah. Number 4, historically, liberal governments have applied laws that are identical to the laws regarding Riddah. So now it's moved away from being an abstract case. We're saying actually in history, this here has shown to be the case. Number 5, invoking non-contractarian liberalism is not an adequate defense. We've explained why. Because non-contractarian anarchical types of liberalism simply don't exist in the world that we live. There is no government which is anarchical right now. Every liberal government, self-proclaimed liberal government in the world, has a contract theory. Every single one. There's no country that I know of that it says I'm liberal, or puts that in its founding father documents or constitution or whatever, and is not contractarian at the same time. Therefore, liberal critiques of liberalism, of Islam, are self-defeating. That's basically the crux of the discussion. Okay. Now, we have already discussed in previous, and we can go to some of the things that we've spoken about before in the Londonaya, as to, because we can quote John Locke. We have before, and I can quote him again right now. I mean, I've got him in this book. We can quote John Locke. We can quote other people about how he thinks himself, John Locke, the founding father of liberalism, that you can't even have an apostasy law, and that's not against liberalism. We've made this quotation before. We can make this quotation again. But the problem is, the issue is not this. The issue is, sorry, I'm trying to get the quotation. The issue is, I mean, look. In fact, let's make a few quotations. Let me read the John Locke quotation once again. I think it's worth reading. John Locke mentions, the first is of those who, being initiated in Mosaical rites and made citizens of that commonwealth, did afterwards apostatize from the worship of God of Israel. These were proceeded against the traitors and rebels, guilty of no less than high treason. For the commonwealth of Jews, different in that from all others, was an absolute theocracy, nor was there or could there be any difference between that commonwealth and the church. So he's basically indicating here very clearly that those who apostated, done riddah, from the religion of Judaism, they are guilty of no less than high treason. Clearly in that case then, the death penalty would be very easily sanctionable, because treason was punishable by death almost everywhere in the world. Look at what Immanuel Kant mentions. He says there cannot even be an article contained in the political constitution that would make it possible for a power in the state, in the case of transgressions of the constitutional laws by the supreme authority, to resist or even restrict in so doing. So he's saying, basically, when the contract is put in place, you cannot resist it. You cannot go against it. These kinds of, in a nutshell, I mean, you could say, these kinds of arguments, in general, mean what? They mean that the framework of liberalism, and this is very important to get this right, not that liberal thinkers said X, Y, Z. No, the framework of the usul, the principles, the qawaid of principles of liberalism itself, they allow a treason law, which means that if someone goes against it, that they can be killed. Look at what it says in the United States Constitution. I'm going to read from the Constitution now. This is the United States Constitution, which is a liberal document. It is a liberal document. Treason against the United States shall consist only in levying war against them, or in adhering to their enemies, giving them aid and comfort. No person shall be convicted of treason unless on the testimony of two witnesses, interesting, yeah, to the same overt act, or on confession in open court. Number 2, the Congress shall have power to declare the punishment of treason, but the attainder of treason shall work corruption of blood or forfeiture except during the life of the person attainted. This is the very famous Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Okay, so it does have a treason clause. Now, how that has been used in history. Before we do so, before we get there, I think it's important for us to realize what we've been saying here. Let's have a little break and ask the question, what's the argument? I want someone to look at the 5 points I've put in the group as well, and ask the question, what's the argument that is being made? And answer one question. If someone returns and says, well, okay, Immanuel Kant said whatever he had to say, John Locke said whatever he had to say, but we don't agree with John Locke and we don't agree with Immanuel Kant, are they missing the boat? Are they missing the argument?
Yeah, they're missing the point.
Before we get there, we're going to have a
sorry,
2-3 minute
asking,
session.
sorry, sorry.
No, we're going to have a 2-3 minute session, speak to the person next to you, and then we can ask and get the information from everyone else. Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's go. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. So basically, if we're looking for the before we get that, what did we say about the two questions that we had in place? Well, the questions I had first, remember.
So we were asked if somebody comes to us and says, well, you can't say John Locke said this and say that John Locke is representative of, liberal
Liberalism.
contractarianism. So you saying John Locke condones this isn't an argument, but our response to that is, well, we're claiming that liberalism's underlying, framework suggests this. And when you look at people who have implemented liberal constitutions like the United States government, they have a very clear article in there which allows for the death penalty for the act of treason. So yeah.
Okay, the death penalty is not necessarily a constitutional matter. I think that's a state matter, by the way, so be careful with that. Everything else you said is absolutely fine. Now the question is, how do we know, how can we establish, because by the way, in some states in America, the death penalty is applied, and some others they're not. So it's a state matter. But the question is now, how do we establish that it's a foundational matter, or it's something which is principal to liberalism? How can we establish that?
It is based on social contract theory.
Yeah.
Stem from that. So basically, if they're saying they disagree with it, then they will have to basically disagree with social contract theory.
Yeah.
If they do, they basically won't have liberalism.
Good, you're right. But how would you prove that?
How would I prove what?
How would you prove that it's a matter of, if you reject the fact that a treason or treachery law or treason law, which has the net effect of giving someone the death penalty, is equivalent to rejecting the entire social contract? How would you prove that?
How would you prove apostasy similar to this?
No, how would you prove that one is equivalent to the other? In other words, rejecting treason or whatever is as if you're rejecting the whole social contract theory.
Right, because the idea of treason is basically you not accepting the social contract theory, right? Because by the social contract theory we mean that you have given up certain rights to the state in exchange for security, and then basically going against that that contract that you consensually or coercively signed without your consent signed is basically treason, right?
Right, okay, good. So, but here's a question, and it might be a very basic one. Does a normal citizen and we're bringing in another ideology here, whether it's direct democracy, or actually direct, they would, so in a representative democracy format, does a normal citizen, okay, have legislative capabilities. In direct forms they would actually, but in representative democracy, would they have it or not?
What do you mean by that?
So what do I mean by that? Someone tell me what I mean by what I just said.
You say direct legislation?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, do they have a legislative capability?
An individual citizen.
Yeah, individual
No,
citizen.
he wouldn't, because it would depend on the people around him, right? In representative democracy.
How does a representative democracy work?
Because a representative democracy involves, the consent of multiple people, right? The choice or preference of a group around you.
Okay, and when they become in power and they make laws, are you obligated to follow those laws by the social contract?
Yeah.
Right. What if you don't want to follow those laws? Do you have?
There's a punishment for those laws.
Yeah. So does your opinion count on a representative framework?
No.
Okay. So let's make it clear. If you're born into a country and now you've got a citizenship, yeah, you've got certain laws. Now you don't like some of those laws because some of them are harsh.
Mhm.
Like many people in America don't like some of the death penalty laws because some of them are very harsh. Do you have a right to say, well, my First Amendment rights or my Second Amendment rights, or I don't want this, or
No, you don't.
can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
You did mention a reference point, I can't remember. But you did, I remember you mentioned it that, I can't remember, but that they have no right to oppose that.
Yeah, they have no right to oppose that.
What
right?
did you mean? Can you remember? I can't remember what you said.
Yeah.
But you said basically they cannot oppose it.
Well, they can't oppose it because why? What did you say, Maaz?
Because they basically agreed to the contract, so they just can't say that now I choose to opt out of the contract.
Yes. You can't have your cake and eat both. You can't have a citizenship and decide what the representative does. Because you're not the representative. The only way out of that is what?
You leave the country.
There's another way out of it.
You kill yourself.
Make a new law.
You run for office.
Yeah.
That's the only way out of that. You become the representative. You become strong enough to make laws. That's how this country works. You got protesting. You got this. You can become a part of a trade union. These are the ways that people do it. But you cannot just decide, I don't like this law, therefore I'm gonna opt out of that one. I mean, last time, like you mentioned, there's a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit. I'm sure you've been given some of those letters at home. You've been driving 50 miles an hour on a 30-mile-per-hour road. You didn't say, well, I decided it was morally unacceptable for such road to be 30 miles an hour.
But it's different, isn't it, how they apply it to someone who's a citizen, someone who's become a citizen. Because they can send them back. It's with the citizen, they deal with them differently, actually.
Well, I mean, I think that they're quite consistent here, to be honest.
Really?
Yeah,
No,
but they have to.
Citizenship. The other.
It's fine. What they're doing here is normal. Well, if you don't have this, you'll have anarchy.
No, we accept it.
Yeah,
What we're saying is that the way they deal with their citizens, one which is born into it, actually even then he's in trouble as well if he's born into it. It depends on his ethnic background.
Mm-hmm.
But
No, you're talking about the national bill.
Yeah,
nationality.
yeah,
Of course.
So it's
that's ridiculous.
Because there's a lot of people being sent back.
But without the social contract theory, what do you have?
Yeah, anarchy.
Anarchy. We have anarchy. That's why the people that keep emphasizing individualism. Well, if you have an individualism that's a proper individualism, it goes all the way to being an anarchy. That's the purest version of individualism, an anarchical individualism. But if you don't, you're going to have to deal with one or two different kinds of fright or scare. Either you deal with the fright of being attacked and killed, or money being taken away from you from the other people who have no laws to restrict them, or you deal with the fright or the consequences of the government itself. And since the latter is more consistent in its application of the laws, most people want predictability in their lives, stability. So that's why we have governments. Anyway, basically, Islamically, classically speaking, the law of Riddah has been it is ijma' actually. I don't know of anyone who says anything other than that. The person who does that in public is not to be killed in a public space. This has been except for what I've seen of the Hanafi school one. I read a book called Al-Mabsut for As-Sarakhsi, and he basically said that the female combatants are not included in that because they're not combatants. But that is interesting because it indicates that it's because they have a new status now. They're harbi, they're combatants or whatever. But
How does that relate to apostasy? You're talking about
A woman
combatants.
apostate.
No, you said combatants.
Yeah, they said that it's she's not a combatant. She's not harbi. She does not become a harbi in any situation. She does not become a combatant in any situation.
Oh, so are you saying the illa is that the male can become a combatant? That's why he is killed.
I don't know if it's illa, because if it's illa or ta'abbud, that's another question. I have to look into the books again.
Okay, so why are they saying that a female is not become a combatant?
Yeah, that's they are saying she doesn't become a combatant, so therefore she's not killed if she becomes an apostate.
So then, doesn't that mean that the apostate is being killed because of the threat that he poses to the state? Therefore, a female is not seen as someone that poses a threat.
That can be indicated.
Yeah, that's sexist.
No, be careful with that kind of wording,
Yeah.
because it's actually.
No, they'll say that. I'm not saying.
They
would say that. They would say.
Wording. Anything to do with Sharia, and if we say a word that seems antithetical,
Yeah,
so it
yeah.
can be kufr.
But I think they won't have a problem with that.
Yeah.
They won't have, I don't think they'll have a problem with that being seen it like that.
No, but it's
Yeah.
this is clearly the difference
Yeah.
between Muslims and
Yeah.
non-Muslims, men and women here. But yeah, so that's the only thing I saw. And there's other opinions here and there, but like liberal Muslims and whatever, they don't count. Some of them are apostates themselves.
Probably have a different view. I've read somewhere that he.
I don't know. I haven't seen anything like that. I wish I could find that. I've heard that as well. Some people say, but I don't know. We'll have to ask the sheikh and so, ask other people. But I don't know anything like that. All I know is that basically people have done istiqra on this matter, meaning they've literally read every single book on what the mu'tamad of the madhab are for each madhab. In fact, there's one particular book which I can give you the reference for afterwards that indicates that there are 18 mu'tamad books of the Hanafi madhab, 17 of the Maliki, 22 of the Shafi'i, and 23 of the Hanbali madhab, and all of them say the same thing about this matter.
Can you repeat that, please? So sorry. Just
I can say it one more time.
Yeah.
That there are 18 books for the Hanafi madhab, which are like they're seen as the authoritative books that people study them and so on. 17 of the Maliki madhab, 22 of the Shafi'i madhab. The brother can tell us more about it, you know those books yourself. And 23 of the Hanbali madhab. So it's last but not least, madhab. And if we include Salafi books or Zahiri fiqh tarjih books, we call it like the new ones, then there's more than that as well. But basically all of them say this thing, which is, except for what I've just mentioned, which is Sarakhsi, which we've come across in Hanafi. So obviously there's going to be more in the Hanafi school that say if Sarakhsi said it. But I'm just giving you the only difference of opinion that I have seen in the madhab, that has been seen, I should be saying.
Can we mention that opinion, or should we just because there's so much?
Well, look, the method that I employ, Wallahu alam, is that why not? Why not mention it? It's not what are we more? We are muqallids. We are people, we're lay people, so we can say this is what the madhabs say. There's one difference of opinion. There's no problem. I don't see any problem in that. So long as the opinion is this is what Ibn Taymiyyah said, in the Sheikh, and I'm happy he's here because then he can correct me when I'm done. He's going to tell me you made this that mistake, and we're going to have to make some clarifications. But I had one particular teacher. His name was Sheikh Abdul Aziz Matrudi. The Sheikh knows him as well, and he was in SOAS University teaching me, and we were going through Raf' al-Malam of Ibn Taymiyyah one time. And the way he put it in terms of this opinions and so on is that so long as there's an opinion which has ta'ifatun min al-ulama that believe in it, it's like a group of ulama that believe in it, then it's mu'tabar. It's something which is seen as acceptable in the Islamic discourse. So if someone says, what about this opinion which says X, Y, Z, but that opinion does not have backing, it doesn't have a ta'ifa min al-ulama believing in it, then that thing is not acceptable as an opinion. It's shadh, it's something which you can put to the side. But if a whole school of thought, this is one opinion in a school of thought, then for the most part, of course, it can be narrated, because this is not so. It's the whole group of scholars in a school of thought says something, and we don't have a right to challenge that and say it's wrong or right, unless we are mujtahids, which we are not. Unless we have the ability to, do tarjih and say this one is right and this one is wrong. But we don't have the tools for that.
What about Ibn al-Qayyim's, his opinion of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah? Where does this fit into the ijma'?
So basically, look, let's bring it what he said, right? So Ibn al-Qayyim al-Jawziyah and many others, like I sent something in the group of al-Mardawi, actually, is another Hanbali, who basically talks about the permissibility of drafting a treaty like the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And he basically says there's more than one opinion, and this is allowed. Now, if you remember the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, those who came to the Muslims, the ones who were like Abu Jandal and so on, who came and they wanted to be rescued, they had to be returned. So now there's a question. The question is, can you have a treaty with non-Muslim nations where they say, for example, which would be the opposite of this situation, but it's more ashad actually. If an apostate is in your land, that you send him over to us, it's more severe, because to leave off a believer coming to the Muslims is a big wajib. It's a wajib in Islam. It's a wajib. So the question that brings itself is it's a wajib for you. It would have been wajib to do nusr of Abu Jandal, right? But that treaty, it stopped a wajib from happening. So this shart in the treaty, it stopped something which would otherwise be obligatory to happen from happening. Do you see what I'm saying? So what if, okay, so it's obligatory, let's say, what's the hukum? What is the ruling of disposing of the murtad, public murtad? So we say that classically it's the death penalty.
Yeah.
But if there's a treaty in place, would it be a shart, a condition, which is an acceptable condition for them to send them over if there's a reason for that? For example, if that nation is weak.
Just so if I've understood.
Do you understand it?
Yeah, if I've understood it right. So you're saying the following: the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, because, for example, it's wajib. For example, a believer who's coming to you for help, to give him the help that he needs. If a contract has overridden that,
Yes.
the lesser of that is, for example, the capital punishment for the murtad. So
Yeah,
if
that's the
that
question.
is allowed,
So yeah.
how could that not be allowed? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, we're saying so because
Okay.
this thing that in the books of usul and stuff, they have these issues of like ash-shart al-munafi lil-qasd and the kinds of unacceptable shurut, unacceptable conditions. Yeah, but it seems, and this is why I spoke to some mashayikh of Saudi Arabia actually. Yeah, we'll talk about it afterwards. But they were saying that in politics the matter is more wide, because especially if there's darura, like the situation darurat bih mahdurat, the very famous qaida principle, that the thing which is wajib, also thing which is necessity, it makes something which is otherwise not halal. So let's put this into action. Like for example, if Brunei, okay, is a country which has tried to implement Islamic laws. The question is, if they did so, what would happen to them? They would be economically sanctioned. Maybe they would, the country itself, the people in it would suffer greatly if they tried to implement this kind of law. So is it legitimate for a country like Brunei, or not even Brunei, like sorry to say Malaysia, or a country which is lesser, weaker, and that would be seriously impacted by the consequences? Would it be okay for such a country to Morocco even? I think there have been, and I sent something in the group, there was a lajna in Morocco of ulama that used Hudaybiyah to make this ruling. So this, I'm not just bringing this out, this thin air. This ruling is already there. There's a lajna in Morocco that had made this ruling already. Would it be okay to say, well, any apostate will send them over to whatever nation? It's possible. So what we're saying is, it's not the fact that it has to be this way, you know, but we're saying that there is sa'ah, there is some level of movement here in the Islamic tradition. There's more than one option. And obviously we know that the hudud anyway are not implemented in times of war. There's all kinds of like issues. Yeah, it's like, for example, in times of war, the hudud are not mentioned, so they're not implemented. The hudud in general, the penal codes.
Times of war.
War, like Umar al-Khattab.
Well, that's a famine.
I think it was
That's not a war.
I think that was war as well. But in wars, it's well known. It's
How
not to
come
be.
it's at war it's they don't implement it?
How comes is a mas'ala of hikmah now, or hikmah or Allah. If it's hikmah, then maybe it's because the people will defect to the other side. Imagine trying to kill somebody and you want them to fight for you. Which one's go to the other side? Khalas, then. Allah alam. You cut their hand off. You know, you want them to hold the weapon and the sword, or you're going to cut their hand. So which one is it? So it's maybe to Allahu alam, to prevent defection. Wallahu alam. But this is maybe one of the hikmah. I don't know the reason, but in terms of war, yeah, for sure. So this is basically it. This is the question. Now, this is the, if you like, the ta'sil, or the abstraction. The hukm, we know what the hukm is according to the madhab, or the, if you like, the schools of thought. The exceptions, we can see what the exceptions could be based on the actions of the Prophet. Number 3, and like the story of Abu Jandal and Hudaybiyah and all that kind of thing. Finally, we come to the implementation. So, I give an example of the Ottoman Empire. Now, why did I choose the Ottoman Empire? I chose the Ottoman Empire because the Ottoman Empire has the best kept records. Of all the Islamic empires that have ever existed, the Ottoman Empire has the best records. Okay, they have something called the Sijil. We call it Sijil as well, actually, in Arabic. They call it Sijil in Turkish. Maybe you know this. I don't know. Yeah, Sijil, or I don't know what they call it.
Is that the same as Allah in the Quran, where it says this? Or is that separate?
That's something else for now.
Okay,
But
okay.
basically, it's the archive of court documents, and they've actually they have now made them electronic copies. So we've got we have some people in Sapience, of course, that are fluent in the Turkish language. I'm not talking about you. No, but they actually can read the script, but before they had the Ottoman script, so this was a very specialized script, and so we looked at the records. Now, we're not saying just because we looked at the records, that's because there were some gaps in the records. There's books written about the gaps in the Ottoman records, but we looked for a very, very long time to see what kinds of court documents there are, and we found this one, figure 1. It's just here. This person called Varvarnam. Okay, this is the.
My granddad.
I'm not sure if you can see it there. This is the court document. It's an official court document right here. You can see it here.
What's it called?
The Sijil, yeah.
How do you spell it?
Sijjil.
Okay.
But it's all in the book, so you can find this information. It's not a problem. But can you see here? Yeah? They've got the. This is what it looks like. A court document. This is what a document looks like, right? Now, I wanted to look at a time. Because the idea was, I was going to look at this document and compare it with the American equivalent at the same time. Because this is 1839, okay? So, what was going on in 1839 in the Ottoman Empire? There was a civil war in the Ottoman Empire. And the civil war was with the Greeks. Very, very famous, well-known war. But what was happening in America 10 years later, or 10, 15 years later, there was also a civil war, the biggest civil war that happened in American history. Actually, the biggest war that happened in American history. So, can you see here, and this is what, when I was speaking with my supervisor at the time, he said this is why it's a very good comparison. He said because you're getting it's a like-for-like comparison for a situation and a like-for-like time. So it's not like we're going 100 years back and we're talking about 10-year give or take. So now we can see, we've talked about the principles of liberalism in Islam. We can see the implementation of it now. So look, let me read to you what we have actually. This is the first time I was translated into English. Once again, I've said this phrase many times, but this time it's not from Arabic, this is from Turkish. So there was this person called Varvarnam. Okay, this is the name of the person. Okay. It says, my high permission granted, and it is no my command of the release for the Christian woman known as Varvarnam, who has been known to become Muslim, and later on it became known that she has apostated, and was brought to me, and later exiled to Bursa, yeah? Now, you are the deputy Qadi, and you are informed. Quickly proceed to release the aforementioned woman. See how clear it is. So this person apostated, Varvarnam, then she left the deen, and she was released by the Hanafi judges. So this is the Hanafi courts, and they released her. She was a Christian woman. Is it because she was a woman, or is it because this was a maslahah issue? And I think it's the latter. It was a maslahah issue because they were well aware of what the Greeks were doing at that time. The Greeks were trying to rally their own, energize the base, and so therefore they were trying to become Muslim and leave Islam so that they can get more people to join the resistance against the Ottomans. But the Ottomans were well aware of this, and so they were clear and didn't care too much about this public apostasies of these people. And there's more than these examples, but there are only a few examples like this in the whole Sijil from Bayezid II, by 15 or whatever it was, 15 or 7, or I don't know when he was around. So we only have a few examples. But when you look at the equivalent counter-example, the case of William Mumford. Okay, this is the case of William Mumford, okay? So it's like-for-like case in America now, yeah? There's a man called William Mumford. And he was captured by Union forces. Obviously, there was two different groups, and the Union forces were...
I'll just wait a second. Mumford?
We can come to the spelling in a second.
Okay.
William Mumford, in 1862, okay? This person... There were different flags in the Civil War, the American Civil War. I'm not sure if you've seen the two counter-American flags, you know, the one with the Confederate flag and the Union flag, right? You've seen how they are different from each other. But the situation was such that the flag meant so much, and still does, by the way, in American history. But he was waving the Confederate flag in the Union territory in New Orleans. And as a result, what did he do? They killed him. But what kind of killing was it? It was a public hanging. It was a public hanging, and there was very little resistance in America at that time. So what did he do? What treason did he commit? He raised the wrong flag at the wrong time. So this is why this is very important, is because number one, if you counter kind of if you contrast this with the Ottoman example, they're releasing people. The American example, they're killing them. And this is exactly in the same time. And this is based on a treason explanation. The Ottomans were Hanafis, and we explained that they do define these kinds of things as treasonous. As-Sarakhsi did that. And moreover, he was actually killed by hanging, and the way he was hanged, it was like, you know, his neck was cracked, and people like, honestly, to look what it says. I mean, I found this newspaper clipping myself, 1862, June 1862. So the New York Herald stated, I'm saying this, right? We have no lack of excitement today with raising the stars and the stripes in one public building and hanging a man for hauling down another one. Mumford seemingly protested his innocence, I'm saying. Mumford says, I never committed an intentional sin in my life, and all I have done to others I would have done by. And when tomorrow I am no longer in this world, you can say, no just and good man as there is in the city of New Orleans has gone in your midst. So he's trying to play the victim card. I mean, he is a victim in many people's eyes, you know, definitely the Confederates. So then look at this. Look how he was killed in front of the people, in front of the big people watching. This is 150 years ago in America, right? I mean, less than that. The fall, which was this is what the New York Herald said about him. The fall, which was about 4 feet, dislocated his neck, but owing to a slight accident, the knot was displaced and worked up his chin, leaving his windpipe partially free. So because they're hanging him, they didn't hang him properly. So he was being like he was. The result was the muscular contraction did not cease for 10 minutes. 10 minutes. Can you imagine? This is the problem with hanging someone. If you cut his head off, sorry to Biani, this would not have happened. Like if you cut his head off, this situation would not have taken place. This is a fact. If you shot his head, this wouldn't have taken place. But because you hanged him, then this though it was no time. Though it was at no time violent, according to this newspaper, right? And look at how many people were there. This was filled by a crowd of not less than 10,000 people. Can you imagine? They're all there cheering and jeering. Well, this is the American culture. So we have here a situation which is very clear. Look at the contrast. If you saw both situations and asked people today to see which one is the Islamic example and which one is the liberal one, I'm pretty sure the Mumford example would be seen as the Islamic one, and the other, the Van Naam, would be seen as the liberal one. But you see a situation here where the implementation of laws, and this is after, by the way, the amendments of the United States Constitution. There was 13 amendments. This is after, this is 1863, so it's in the midst of the Civil War, but it's near the end of it because the Civil War finished in 1865. And this is after Abraham Lincoln. I mean, you've seen Abraham Lincoln. This is Abraham Lincoln existed before that. And so we're talking about the figures of liberalism and stuff. They acquiesced and placated to this reality. So now we have issues. The issues are not necessarily like this. They have extrajudicial killings. They have all kinds of implementation type issues. And the point we're making is they'll make an argument from contractarianism. But what we have seen, ladies and gentlemen watching at home, is that not only are these arguments unsound abstractly, but they are unsound historically as well, and contemporaneously. And we can obviously open the can of worms on that. So just before we finish, but bearing in mind all that we've mentioned, Furqan, you've been a bit quiet. Yes, let's get you involved. Let's start with the first thing. What is the first main type of argument? If someone who's, let's say, liberally inclined came and said, well, your religion allows X, Y, and Z, how would you, in regards to the laws of Riddah, how would you respond to that? The first thing that we'd say.
Yeah, I would say yes, he does.
Okay, no, but this person is a liberal, so what do you want to show them? Do you want to show them that this is something which is remarkable or something which is unremarkable based on his worldview?
I think I would say yes, he does, and then I would say this, and I would obviously prove why it's not wrong, and my argument would have been before this that if you go to any Islamic country, we know a lot of people that are murtad, or they don't believe, or they don't practice, or they don't follow Islam, but I've never seen a case of someone being hung or someone being killed because of not believing. And the only cases that if you ever were to see would be someone that is openly, publicly murtad and would go against Islam. So if we transpolate that case to a liberal country, we have someone that openly goes against the country, against their values, liberal values, and becomes a danger for it. They will find a way to shut him down.
I'm with you, but look at the examples we've used today with William Mumford.
Yeah.
Was he a danger?
No.
Well, I mean, was his act, let's be very specific of the questioning, was his act that he done a dangerous action or was it a symbolic action?
Symbolic.
What was the action that he done?
He raised a flag.
Okay, and what was the problem with that? I think he actually took down the Union flag. He took it down, yeah. He took down the Union flag. So what is that? A desecration of a flag?
Yeah, just showing that it doesn't agree with maybe whatever the values or whatever they were trying to, the values of the Union flag.
Okay, and what happened to him?
So they didn't like the way he expressed, or they didn't like his...
what did they say he was? What was he doing?
He was treason. No,
treason. And then what did they do to him?
So they killed him.
They killed him. And did they do so despite the Constitution or because of, or in
following the Constitution?
Yeah, following the Constitution.
Yeah. So, yeah.
So therefore, you don't always have to be a danger to the state in order to be killed for treason.
Okay.
Do you see the point?
Yeah.
It can result in a symbolic action, which they see as unacceptable, and that has happened. But now the question is, does the liberal framework allow that? Tariq, what do you think about that?
Yes, it does.
And how do we know that it does?
Because we have the treason laws in those various countries, and we have examples of people being killed because of treason.
Mm-hmm.
And if you compare that with the Islamic, as we did with the Turkish lady, we can see that there's more. We have examples of leniency. We have the same issue with we have the treason. It would be comparison with the treason law, but we have examples of people being actually they weren't prosecuted.
Excellent. So it's conceivable that someone can be prosecuted, and it's conceivable that the punishment will be waived. Is that conceivability a liberal conceivability, or is it also an Islamic one? Both. So since it's both a liberal conceivability and an Islamic one, what does that make a liberal argument against this type of punishment? Hypocritical. It's fruitless. It's self-defeating. Hopefully everyone understands that. But if you want to go back to the argument, it's in the very first page. I think it's the first page, or one of the first pages, second page or third page of the little book. I've sent it in the group as well. Guys, that will be it for today. Jazakumullahu khairan wa assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.